Andre Cole was 41 years old, and for 18 months he had been a widower. He planned her funeral. He identified her body. He sat in the front pew and held himself together until he got home. And then he fell apart for 3 days straight. He sold the house they shared. He rebuilt his life around her absence. Smaller, quieter, controlled. He grieved her completely and honestly, the way a man does when he has nothing to hide and everything to lose. Then, on a Tuesday morning in October, moving through Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport for a routine work trip, he heard a laugh he had not heard in 18 months. Her laugh, unmistakable, 40 feet away. He turned, and there she was, alive, rested, and leaning into another man's hand at her back, boarding a flight to Miami. She had not died. She had simply decided he wasn't worth staying for, and that he was worth $800,000 on the way out. She had no idea he had just seen her. What Andre Cole did next would cost her everything. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The protein bar went into his left jacket pocket. The phone charger went into the front zipper of his carry-on. Andre Cole moved through his apartment the way he moved through everything these days, quietly, precisely, with no wasted steps. It was 5:47 in the morning. He had checked his bag twice already. He checked it again. Laptop, project files, the folded copy of the Charlotte site specs he'd printed the night before, even though they were already on his laptop, because paper didn't crash and paper didn't need a Wi-Fi password. 2 extra phone cables, the protein bar in his left pocket and a second one in the right, because he did not eat airport food before noon if he could help it. His apartment was clean and still. Small living room, bare walls except for one framed print Beverly had given him last Christmas. A Georgia O'Keeffe she'd picked because, she said, it looked like something you'd actually look at. She was right. He looked at it most mornings. It was the kind of painting that asked nothing of you. He turned off the kitchen light. He stood in the hallway for just a moment, the way a man will sometimes stand in a place before leaving it, not for any reason he could name. Then he picked up his bag and walked out. He'd started arriving 90 minutes early after the accident, not because flying scared him, because standing still in an empty apartment at 6 a.m. with nowhere to be was worse than any terminal crowd. Hartsfield-Jackson was already alive when he got there. It was always alive. That was the thing about this airport. It did not have slow mornings. Families moved in tight clusters through the main atrium, rolling bags bumping over the tile seams. A woman in scrubs walked fast, eating a granola bar, talking on her phone. 2 college kids were already asleep across plastic chairs near baggage claim, heads tilted at angles that would hurt later. Andre moved through all of it without friction. He had a system. Check-in kiosk, then security, then the far end of Concourse T, where the foot traffic thinned and the seats near the windows faced the tarmac. He'd found that spot 2 years ago on a trip to Dallas, and it had been his spot ever since. Quiet enough to read. Bright enough in the mornings, when the October light came flat and sideways through the terminal glass. He got through security in 11 minutes. He stopped at a coffee stand near the escalators and ordered black coffee. No room. The woman behind the counter had a name tag that said Marisol, and she handed him the cup without looking up, already moving to the next order. He liked that. He didn't need conversation at 6:30 in the morning. He didn't need much these days. He walked. Gate T12 was his. He'd confirmed it twice before leaving the apartment and once more in the lift. Charlotte flight, 8:10 departure, standard 2-hour trip. He had a site meeting at 1 p.m. and would be back in Atlanta by 9. Unremarkable. The kind of Tuesday that fills up a work calendar without leaving any impression. He was 50 feet from his gate when his feet slowed. Not because anything alarmed him, just because a sound, a laugh. high and bright and particular, the kind of laugh that carries its own signature the way a voice does, the way handwriting does. His body registered it before his mind caught up. Some deep and stupid part of him responded to it the way it had always responded to it, reflexively, warmly, the way you turn toward familiar music without deciding to. He turned, 40 feet away. A coffee kiosk. A woman in a camel coat had her head thrown back, laughing at something the man beside her had just said. Full laugh. Unguarded. Her whole face in it. Andre stopped moving. The camel coat. The way she held her coffee cup with both palms wrapped around it. Not by the sleeve, not by the handle. Both palms, the way she always did. The angle of her shoulders. The particular way her head tilted back when something genuinely got her. Andre Cole did not move. He stood in the middle of the terminal with 200 people flowing around him like water around a rock, and he stared at the back of that woman's head, and he waited for the feeling to correct itself the way it sometimes did. The cruelty of a passing resemblance, the brain snagging on a coat or a laugh, and briefly insisting on something impossible. It had happened before, in the grocery store once, in the parking lot of his office. The mind playing its grief games, but she hadn't turned yet, and that laugh had not stopped being the right laugh. Andre stood still. People moved around him. A rolling suitcase clipped his heel. Someone said, "Excuse me," without looking at him. He didn't move. He kept his eyes on the woman in the camel coat, and he waited for the mistake to reveal itself. She laughed again, quieter this time, more private. That was the one. The first laugh had been the social laugh, the one she gave when something surprised her into delight. The second was the one she saved, the one that meant she was actually comfortable. Andre had spent 4 years learning the difference, and he had never once confused them. He took a slow breath through his nose. The man beside her was older, mid-40s, maybe 45, well-built, easy in his body, wearing a charcoal suit that hadn't come off a rack. His shoes were the kind of shoes that didn't need polishing because they were never neglected long enough to need it. He stood beside her at the kiosk, the way men stand when they're used to standing beside someone, close, casual, owning the proximity without announcing it. He said something Andre couldn't hear. Diane turned her face up toward him and smiled. Andre had seen that smile 10,000 times. He had been the reason for it. He remembered the specific weight of being its reason. The memory arrived without permission, and he pushed it flat. The man put his hand at the small of her back. Not tentative, not new. The easy pressure of a hand that had learned where it belonged. She leaned into it. Andre pulled out his phone. His hands were steady. He found that interesting. Distantly. The way a man notices weather through a window. He opened the camera. He kept the phone low and angled it up, using the passing bodies as a natural screen. He was 50 feet out. The shot caught them both in profile. Diane's face turned slightly toward the man, his hand at her back, the kiosk behind them. Clear enough? He took 3 photos. Then he moved. He walked toward them the way he walked through any crowd. Unhurried, directional, using the natural gaps between people. He was 30 feet out. 25. He adjusted his angle so that a family with a stroller moved between him and the kiosk at the right moment. He got close enough to see the ring on her right hand. Gold band, simple, nothing like what he had given her. And the way the morning light caught the side of her face. It was Diane, not the grief, not the brain's ugly habit of wanting what it couldn't have. Diane Cole, 39 years old, alive and rested, and bright-eyed in a terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson, leaning against a man in a charcoal suit, while her husband stood 20 feet away, holding a phone and not being seen. He looked up. The gate monitor above them was mid-cycle. It rolled over and stopped. Flight 1147, Miami, boarding. He looked back at her. She was pulling the strap of a weekend bag up onto her shoulder, a bag he had never seen. Dark leather, the kind of bag a person buys when they're starting over. The man took it from her without being asked, and she let him. And they moved toward the gate together, unhurried. Two people, with nowhere to be, but where they were going. Andre did not follow. He stood at the edge of the seating area and watched them present their boarding passes, watched the gate agent scan them both, watched the man hold the door for her as they went through, watched the door close behind them with the quiet, final sound of a door that has no reason to open again. He walked to the window. Outside on the tarmac, ground crew moved around the aircraft in their practiced, efficient patterns. The morning light was thin and gray. A fuel truck pulled away from the nose of the plane. Slowly, the jetway retracted. The plane began to move. Not fast, just that first slow, heavy drift backward, the way large things begin to move, with weight and with purpose, and with no concern at all for what they were leaving behind. Andre watched it until it turned toward the taxiway, and the tail disappeared behind a maintenance building. He sat down. The chair was the hard plastic kind that airports use because airports do not want you to sleep in them. He sat in it anyway. His carry-on was at his feet. His coffee had gone cold. The gate monitor above him had already rolled over to the next flight. Gate T11, to his left, was filling up with people for an 8:40 to Dallas. He sat for 22 minutes. He knew it was 22 minutes because he watched the clock above the departures board the whole time without meaning to. At 8:32, his Charlotte flight pushed back without him. He watched that too. Then he looked down at his phone. He opened his contacts. He pressed the name at the top of the list, the one he had kept there for 18 months, because she was the first person he called when anything happened, good or bad or in between. Beverly picked up on the second ring. "Hey, how's Charlotte?" Andre looked out at the empty tarmac. "I'm still in Atlanta," he said. His voice came out level. Even. A man reporting a fact. "I need to tell you something. I just saw Diane. At the airport. She's alive, Bev." Beverly didn't speak for 3 full seconds. That was how Andre knew she had heard him correctly. Beverly Cole did not do silence. Silence meant the thing was too large for her usual speed. Then it came. "What do you mean, she's alive? Andre, what are you—" Her voice climbed fast. "Are you sure? Are you absolutely— How are you even—" A sharp breath. "I'm calling the police. Give me 2 minutes. I'm calling right now." "Bev." One word. Flat and quiet. She stopped. "Listen to me," he said. "I need you to hear what I'm telling you before you do anything. Can you do that?" A pause. He could hear her breathing. Fast. Controlled. A woman sitting on something enormous. "Talk," she said. "If I call the police right now, she knows I know." He kept his voice even, steady, like he was walking her through load calculations on a job site. They make contact. She gets spooked. She runs. And she has been doing this for 18 months, Bev. She has a head start I can't see yet, and money I don't know about yet, and a man beside her who looks like he knows exactly what he's doing. If she disappears again— He stopped. "Let that sit. I get nothing. You understand? Nothing. No answers. No accountability. Nothing. Silence on the line. So what do you do?" Beverly's voice had come down. Not calm. She was nowhere near calm. But focused. That was the thing about Beverly. She could be furious and functional at the same time. Always could. "I find out how," Andre said. "Before I do anything else, I need to know how." He drove home with the radio off. His apartment was the same as he had left it 2 hours ago. Neat. Quiet. The kind of space that had been arranged with deliberate care by a man who needed his environment to hold still when nothing else would. He set his bag by the door. He called his project manager in Charlotte and said there was a family matter and he would reschedule. He didn't explain. He never explained. Then he stood in the middle of his living room for a moment, looking at nothing. How does a woman fake her death in a car accident? He took the question apart the way he took every problem apart. Not all at once, but piece by piece, in order, starting with what he could actually verify. He went to the closet. On the top shelf, behind a box of tax documents and a spare set of linens, was a banker's box he had not opened in 14 months. He knew what was in it. That was precisely why he had not opened it. He had packed it up in the first terrible weeks after the funeral, the paperwork, the documents, the administrative debris of a person's death, and he had put it up there because dealing with it had felt, at the time, like a desecration he wasn't ready to commit. He pulled it down now. He set it on the kitchen table and opened the lid. The smell hit him first. Not a bad smell. Just paper and time and the faint trace of her perfume from a condolence card someone had tucked into the pile. He set the card aside without reading it. He went through the documents methodically. Death certificate, funeral home receipts, the deed transfer on the house, a folder of medical records he had requested and never looked at. And at the bottom of the box, still in the envelope from the insurance company, unopened, sealed, exactly as it had arrived. The file on her life insurance policy. He had not been able to open it. Not then. He opened it now. He read it slowly, once through to understand the structure of it, and then again from the beginning because some of it didn't track on the first pass, and he needed to be sure he was reading it correctly. The policy, $800,000, taken out 4 years ago. Joint policy, both names, standard terms. The claim, filed 11 days after the accident. He had not filed it. He had not filed anything. In those first weeks, he had barely been able to dress himself in the morning. The payout, approved and disbursed in full, $800,000, to an account at a regional bank in Georgia. An account he had never opened. An account he had never heard of. The law firm on the disbursement paperwork, the firm listed as the attorney of record for the claim filing, was a name he didn't recognize either. He found the attorney's signature at the bottom of the claim authorization form. Philip Grant, Esco. He read the name twice. He set the document down flat on the table. Philip Grant. He turned the name over in his mind the way you turn over something you found on the ground, looking for a mark that tells you where it came from. Nothing. No memory attached to it. No face. No conversation. In 11 years of marriage, he had never once heard Diane mention that name. The money had never reached him. He had never filed a claim. He had never hired a lawyer. She didn't just leave. She took everything on the way out. And someone with a law license had stood beside her while she did it, and signed his name to it like it was just another Tuesday. Andre stared at the name on the document. Philip Grant. Esq. He did not move for a long time. Andre did not sleep. He tried once, around midnight, lay down on top of the covers with his shoes off, and stared at the ceiling for 20 minutes, while his mind ran the same loop it had been running since the airport. Then he got up, went to the kitchen, and made coffee. He found a yellow legal pad in the drawer beside the stove. He sat down at the table, the same chair, the same document still sitting in front of him, and he started writing. Not feelings, questions. How did the claim get filed without my signature? Who opened the account the money went to? How does a body get identified wrong? What did Philip Grant know? And when did he know it? Who else knew she was alive? He filled 2 pages before the sun came up. The questions kept splitting into smaller questions, each one leading somewhere he didn't have the tools to follow yet. He was an engineer. He could read a system. He could find where the load was being transferred wrong, where the foundation had been compromised. But this was a system he hadn't built and didn't have the blueprints for. He needed someone who did. He called Beverly at 7:15. She picked up on the first ring. She had probably not slept either. "The investigator," he said. "The one you used 2 years ago. The workplace thing. A beat." Inez Washington. Is she good? She's the reason I still have my job and my former supervisor doesn't. Beverly's voice was dry, precise. She's expensive. I know. I mean actually expensive. Beverly. A pause. I'll text you her number. Inez Washington called him back within the hour. Her voice on the phone was flat and businesslike. Not unfriendly, just efficient, the way a person sounds when they have stopped using words they don't need. She had an opening that afternoon. Her office was in a low building near Ponce de Leon. No sign on the door, just a suite number, the kind of space that was clean and functional and made no effort to impress anyone. A waiting area with 3 chairs, a receptionist who didn't look up from her monitor when Andre walked in, and then Inez herself, coming out to meet him at exactly the time she said she would. She was a compact woman, somewhere in her early 50s, with close-cropped natural hair going silver at the temples, and eyes that moved over him once, quickly, thoroughly, and then settled. She wore a plain gray blazer over a white shirt. No jewelry except a watch. She shook his hand and led him back to a small conference room with a table, 4 chairs, and nothing on the walls. "Tell me," she said. He told her. He laid it out the same way he had laid it out for Beverly, in order, without interruption, starting with the airport and ending with Philip Grant's name on the disbursement paperwork. He set the printed airport photographs on the table in front of her. He placed the insurance documents beside them. He gave her the flight number he had written down in the terminal, 11:47 Miami, and the date and the time. He did not tell her how he felt about any of it. Inez did not ask. She looked at the photographs first, studied them without picking them up, the same way he studied a structural drawing, taking in the whole before focusing on detail. Then she pulled the insurance documents toward her and read through them slowly, 1 page at a time. Halfway through, she stopped. She went back to the disbursement page, read it again, set it down. "Philip Grant is listed here as the originating attorney," she said. "I noticed that. You understand what that means." It wasn't a question, but he answered it anyway. He didn't just process the claim, he initiated it. "Right." She set the page down flat. "A referral attorney gets brought in after a claim is already in motion. An originating attorney starts the paperwork. He was the one who opened the file, who drafted the claim document, who knew the policy existed, and knew the terms, and knew the payout structure." She looked at him steadily. He had to know about this policy before she allegedly died. That's not a detail you find out after. Insurance fraud built like this: a specific beneficiary account, a clean payout, no red flags triggered in processing. That takes preparation. That takes time. This was not something 2 people decided on a Tuesday. Andre nodded once. "He had to have been involved from early on," Inez said, "which means there's a timeline here that goes back further than the accident." She closed the folder and folded her hands on top of it. "I'll take the case," she said. They discussed her rate. He agreed without negotiating. They shook hands. He drove home with the legal pad on the passenger seat. Back at his kitchen table, he flipped to a clean page. He wrote 2 words in the center of it and drew a circle around them: Philip Grant. He looked at that for a moment. Then, just beneath it, he wrote 2 more words and underlined them. Who else? 10 days passed. Andre worked. He showed up to the office, sat at his desk, reviewed load calculations for a drainage project in DeKalb County, and answered emails. His hands did the work. His mind was somewhere else the entire time. He slept in pieces. 2 hours, then awake. 3 hours, then awake. He stopped fighting it and started keeping the legal pad on the nightstand. Whenever a new question surfaced in the dark, he wrote it down. Beverly called on Sunday the way she always did. He answered the way he always did. They did not talk about Miami. They did not talk about Philip Grant. They talked about the drainage project and Beverly's co-worker who kept microwaving fish in the break room, and a documentary about deep-sea fish she had watched twice. It was the most normal 20 minutes of his week, and he held on to it. Inez called on a Thursday morning, just after 8. "Come in," she said. "Today, if you can." He knew from her tone not to ask questions over the phone. He texted Beverly the time and the address. She was already in the parking lot when he arrived. Inez had the folder open on the conference table when they walked in. She did not make small talk. She did not offer them coffee. She sat down, waited for them to sit, and began. "The accident victim," she said, "was not Diane Cole." The room was very quiet. She was a Jane Doe. Died separately, in a different incident, within 12 hours of the staged crash. No next of kin ever came forward. She was roughly Diane's height and build. 5'6", medium frame, similar age range. She had been in the system for 4 days when the accident report was filed. Inez turned the folder so they could see it. There was a document. Andre looked at it without touching it. "Someone knew she was there," Inez said. "Someone checked. Someone planned around her." Beverly made a sound, not quite a word. She stopped herself. "The body identification," Inez continued, "was performed at the Fulton County Medical Examiner's office. The family member who identified her was Robert Whitfield, Diane's father." Andre went still. Robert. He had sat across from Robert Whitfield at least a dozen times in the 18 months since the accident. He had checked on him. He had brought food to that house twice. He had listened to that man grieve his daughter. "Inez," he said carefully, "did he know?" "That I can't tell you yet," she said. "What I can tell you is this." She slid a photograph across the table. It was a still from a surveillance camera. Grainy, time-stamped, but clear enough. A parking lot. A dark sedan. "That is Philip Grant's vehicle, photographed in the medical examiner's office parking lot the morning of the identification. He was there. He managed that process somehow. Whether Robert Whitfield understood what he was participating in is a separate question." Andre stared at the photograph. "There's more," Inez said. She turned another page. Philip Grant did not begin his career in insurance law. For the first 6 years after he passed the bar, he worked at the Fulton County Medical Examiner's office as a legal liaison. He was the attorney who handled documentation between the ME's office and law enforcement. He processed identification paperwork. He knew the intake procedures. He knew the filing requirements, and he knew exactly which parts of the identification process were verified formally and which parts were accepted on a grieving family member's word. She let that sit for a moment. He did not stumble into this scheme. He built it. He used knowledge he spent 6 years acquiring to design a process with a specific gap in it. One man, one moment of grief, one photograph, and he walked Robert Whitfield right through that gap. Beverly's jaw was tight. She had both hands flat on the table, and she was not moving them. Andre looked at the bar history document, looked at the parking lot photograph, looked at the disbursement paperwork from the original folder, still sitting at the edge of the table where Inez had placed it 10 days ago. "Where are they now?" he said. Inez turned to the last page. "Miami. They've been there for 14 months. They are living as Diana and Philip Mercer." She slid a final photograph across. A building, waterfront, pale concrete, and blue glass. The kind of place that cost money to even look at. They purchased a condo there 2 months after the accident. $740,000. Cash. Beverly exhaled slowly through her nose. It was the most controlled sound Andre had ever heard her make. No one spoke for a moment. Then Beverly turned to him. Her voice was quiet, quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that comes after a person has burned through every louder thing they had. "What do you want to do?" Andre reached across the table and turned to a clean page on the legal pad. "All of it." Andre made the call that evening. He stood at his kitchen window with his phone in his hand and looked out at the parking lot below. Ordinary. Quiet. A few cars under yellow light. And dialed Robert Whitfield's number, the same way he had dialed it a dozen times before. To check in. to ask how the old man was eating, to be the son-in-law who had not disappeared just because the daughter did. It rang twice. Andre. Robert's voice was warm the way it always was. 70 years of Southern hospitality baked into a single word. "How you doing, son?" "I'm doing all right," Andre said. "I was going to cook tomorrow night. Thought you might want to come by." A pause. Then, "You sure don't have to do that." "I know I don't." Another pause, shorter this time, and full of the particular gratitude of a man who had been lonely longer than he liked to admit. "What time?" Robert asked. Robert arrived at 6:30, with a bottle of sweet tea and his good jacket. Andre had made smothered chicken, rice, and green beans the way his mother used to make them. Slow-cooked, nothing fancy, the kind of meal that said, "I put time into this." The apartment was clean. The table was set for two. They ate. Robert talked. He talked about his neighbor's new dog, about his left knee that had been bothering him since August, about a church revival coming up in November that he was thinking about attending. Andre listened. He asked the right questions. He refilled Robert's glass without being asked. Robert set his fork down eventually and looked around the apartment, the clean lines of it, the sparse furniture, the absence of anything that had belonged to the house they used to share. And something moved through his face. "I want you to know," Robert said, "that what you've done, keeping in touch, checking on an old man, that means more than I can tell you. Most men would have walked away from the whole situation. You didn't." Andre looked at him across the table. "You were important to her," he said. "That didn't change." Robert nodded slowly and reached for his glass. Andre reached under the table. He set the photograph down between their plates, flat. No announcement. Diane and Philip at the airport coffee kiosk, her head thrown back, his hand at the small of her back. Both of them, with nowhere to be but where they were. Robert looked down at it. The color left his face the way water leaves a glass. Quickly, completely, nothing left. He did not say, "That can't be her." He did not say, "Where did you get this?" He did not say anything at all. He just sat there with his hands wrapped around his sweet tea and stared at the photograph, and the muscle in his jaw moved once, twice, and then went still. That was enough. Andre waited. He was good at waiting. "She told me," Robert said finally. His voice had dropped to almost nothing. "About 6 months after, she said she had to leave. She said you had been... She said there was..." He stopped. He pressed his lips together. "She said things hadn't been right between y'all for a long time, that she'd been afraid." "Afraid," Andre repeated. The words sat on the table like something neither of them wanted to touch. "I chose to believe her," Robert said. "She's my daughter. She was standing in front of me, and she was alive, and I..." His voice broke on the last word. He gathered himself. "I should have called you. I know I should have. I didn't." Andre let the silence hold for a moment. Then he reached under the table again. He set down the second photograph. The parking lot. Philip Grant's dark sedan. The timestamp in the corner. "That was taken at the medical examiner's office," Andre said. "The morning you identified the body." Robert stared at it. "Robert!" Andre's voice was calm, careful. "Before they brought you in, did anyone show you a photograph first? A picture of the deceased? Before you ever saw her in person?" The silence that followed was the longest of the evening. Robert Whitfield set his glass down very slowly. He looked at the photograph of the parking lot. He looked at his own hands. He opened his mouth and then closed it again. And in that closing was every answer Andre needed. He had been shown a photograph, in a parking lot, by a man in a suit who spoke quietly and told him what he was looking at and guided him through the whole thing before he ever walked inside. He had never really identified anyone. He had only confirmed what Philip Grant had already told him to see. "He used you," Andre said. Not harshly, just true. The same way he used everything else. Robert's eyes went wet. He did not let them spill. "The money," Andre said. "The insurance policy. Did she tell you about that?" Robert looked up. "What money?" $800,000, Andre said. "Filed in my name. Paid to an account I never opened. I never saw a dollar of it, Robert. Not one." The old man sat very still. Whatever had been holding him together quietly came apart. "I didn't know that," he whispered. "Andre, I swear to God I did not know that." "I believe you," Andre said. And he did. He reached across the table and turned to a clean page on the legal pad he had brought from the kitchen counter. "Then I need you to tell me everything you remember about that morning," he said. "Everything! Start from when you arrived in that parking lot." Andre called his attorney at 7:45 the next morning. He had been awake since 5. The legal pad from the night before sat on the kitchen counter, covered front and back in Robert's account of that parking lot morning. The suit, the voice, the photograph held up in Philip Grant's steady hand, the gentle coaching before Robert ever set foot inside the building. Andre had written all of it down in his clean, precise engineer's handwriting. Dates, times, sequence of events. The exact words Robert remembered being told. He read it back once, then capped the pen. Then he called Marcus Webb. Marcus Webb's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, with windows that looked out over the city, and a waiting room that smelled like leather and expensive coffee. He was 60 years old, trim and unhurried, with the particular confidence of a man who had spent 30 years handling cases that other attorneys declined. Beverly had found him the same way she found most things, through someone who owed her a favor. Andre arrived at 9 sharp with a copy of Inez's full documentation package in a manila folder, and Robert's written statement in a separate envelope. He sat down across from Marcus, set both items on the desk, and said, "Tell me what I have." Marcus spent 40 minutes going through it. He did not rush. He turned each page the way a man turns pages when he is reading for precision, not speed. Occasionally he made a note on the legal pad beside him. Occasionally he went back to reread something. Andre sat across from him and waited. When Marcus finally set the last page down, he took off his glasses and looked at Andre. "Wire fraud," he said. "Mail fraud. Insurance fraud. Identity fraud. Obstruction of justice." He tapped the stack. "This is not a thin case. This is one of the cleaner fraud packages I have seen in a long time, and I have seen a lot of fraud packages." "And Grant?" Andre asked. Marcus leaned back. "That is where it gets particularly permanent." He explained it methodically, which Andre appreciated. Because Philip Grant had not merely assisted the fraud, he had executed it using his bar license as the primary instrument. The fraudulent insurance claim had been filed under his bar number. The disbursement paperwork bore his professional credentials. The legal entity through which the payout was laundered had been created by him in his capacity as a licensed attorney, using his professional standing to make every piece of it look legitimate. "The state bar's disciplinary process," Marcus said, "runs on its own track, parallel to the criminal case, independent of it. It does not require a conviction. It does not care about cooperation agreements. It does not negotiate. Meaning," Andre said, "meaning the moment that bar complaint is filed, his license is already functionally dead. Cooperation gets him a reduced sentence in a federal criminal case. It gets him nothing with the bar. If he hands prosecutors everything they need tomorrow morning, he still loses his license. Permanently. Every state he is currently licensed in follows Georgia's lead. There is no version of this where Philip Grant practices law again." Marcus said it without satisfaction. He was just reading the load calculations. Andre nodded once. "Good." Inez was waiting in the lobby when the meeting concluded. Andre had asked her to come. There was one more thing she had wanted to deliver in person, and she had saved it. They found a quiet corner of the lobby, 2 chairs and a low table near the window. Inez set a single printed page in front of Andre. Summary sheet. Clean columns. I went back through your joint account history, she said. All of it. 11 months before the accident. Andre looked at the page. The transfers were listed in order. Modest amounts. 200 here, 400 there. Nothing large enough to draw attention. Methodical. Patient. Spread across 11 months so that no single withdrawal created a pattern that a busy man reviewing a monthly statement would notice. Now, look at the right column, Inez said. Andre looked. Every transfer had a corresponding date, and beside each date, a notation. PG calendar. Confirmed meeting. Philip Grant's professional calendar, obtained through a source at his former firm. Every single transfer from their joint accounts had occurred within 48 hours of a documented meeting between Diane and Philip. Every one. 11 months. Not one exception. Andre sat with that for a moment. This was not an affair that turned into a scheme, Inez said. She said it without softness, because she understood that he needed the information clean. They were running a scheme. The relationship was the cover. She started moving your money out of your joint accounts before most couples would have even started couples therapy. Andre looked at the page. He thought about that last year. The quiet evenings, the business-like mornings, the way she had kissed him goodbye in the driveway, like it was a thing she was completing rather than a thing she meant. He had called it marital drift. He had been patient with it. He had trusted that it would correct itself, the way a structure settles and finds its own level. She had been in a meeting with Philip Grant 48 hours before. Andre folded the summary sheet in half and put it in the folder with everything else. Then he took out his phone and opened the airline app. He booked 2 flights to Miami, one for himself, one for Beverly. Then he called Robert Whitfield. "Robert," he said, "I need you to write down a date." The flight was 2 hours and 15 minutes. Andre spent most of it looking out the window. Beverly slept with a neck pillow and a magazine open in her lap that she had stopped reading somewhere over Georgia. The sky was flat and white and wide. Miami came up beneath them bright and sprawling. Palm trees and water and sun bouncing off everything at once. It looked like a place people came to start over. Andre thought that was about right. Robert checked into his hotel near Brickell without incident. Andre walked him to the lobby, confirmed the time for the following morning, and shook his hand. Robert looked tired. Not the tired of travel. The tired of a man carrying something heavy toward the place where he finally sets it down. "Tomorrow," Robert said. He nodded once, like he was confirming it to himself. "Tomorrow," Andre said. He and Beverly got back in the rental car. Inez had provided the address of Philip's consulting office 3 days ago, a small professional suite in a quiet part of Coral Gables, close enough to the money to feel legitimate, far enough from downtown to avoid anyone who might recognize a name from Atlanta. Beverly looked at the address on her phone. 15 minutes. Andre pulled out of the hotel lot and drove. The office was exactly what Inez had described. A clean, modest suite on the second floor of a low-rise building with a fountain out front that nobody was looking at. The name on the frosted glass door read, Mercer Financial Consulting. Below it, smaller, Philip Mercer, J.D., still using the degree. Of course he was. Andre held the door for Beverly. She walked in without a word. The receptionist, young, pleasant, a small vase of white flowers on her desk, looked up and smiled. "Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment?" "No," Andre said. "Tell him Andre Cole is here." Something in his tone made her reach for the phone without asking a follow-up question. They waited less than 90 seconds. The inner office door opened, and Philip Grant stepped out, taller than Andre had expected, silver at the temples, wearing a charcoal blazer over a pale blue shirt. He looked like a man who had carefully curated every visible detail of himself. He moved with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to entering rooms and immediately owning them. Then he saw Andre's face. It lasted less than a second. A flicker. Fast, involuntary, gone almost before it arrived. But Andre caught it, the way he caught everything. the jaw going slightly slack, the eyes widening by a fraction, the body registering what the mind hadn't finished processing yet. Then the recovery, smooth and practiced, and about a half-second too late. Philip smiled broadly and extended his hand. "Mr. Cole, I'm Philip Mercer. I don't believe we've met. How can I help you today?" Andre looked at the hand. He did not take it. The smile held for a moment longer than was comfortable, and then Philip lowered his hand. "My office," Andre said. The inner office had large windows and a view of the building's small courtyard. A mahogany desk, 2 leather chairs for clients, a bookshelf with law texts arranged by spine color rather than subject, which told Andre everything he needed to know about who the shelf was for. Andre set the documentation package on the desk. He sat down. He said nothing. Philip sat across from him and looked at the folder. He did not open it immediately. He was still performing, recalibrating, looking for the angle. "I'm not sure what this is," he said pleasantly, "but if you're looking for legal representation—" "Open it," Andre said. Philip opened it. He read slowly. Andre watched him. Beverly stood near the door, arms folded, completely still. The room was quiet, except for the sound of pages turning and the faint hum of the building's air conditioning. Philip got through the insurance disbursement records without visible reaction. He got through the Jane Doe documentation with a slight tightening around the eyes. He got through the ME's parking lot surveillance summary and the bar registration history and the Miami financial records and the 11-month transfer timeline without making a sound. Then he turned to the bar complaint. It was 4 pages, pre-drafted, notarized, signed by Andre and by Marcus Webb. At the top of the first page, in clean 12-point type, "In the matter of Philip James Grant, bar number GA0047821, complaint for fraudulent filing, abuse of professional position, and conduct involving moral turpitude. A filing date field, left blank. 1 line. Waiting." Philip's breathing changed. His chest rose and held. He set the page down very carefully, the way a man sets down something he does not want to drop. Andre spoke. "What's coming is already decided," he said. His voice was even. "Federal wire fraud, mail fraud, insurance fraud, identity fraud, obstruction. The civil asset recovery action against the condo has already been drafted. Your name and Diane's are both on it." He paused. "Your former firm in Atlanta received a full documentation package yesterday morning. By now, their managing partner has spoken to their communications team about how they handle the press inquiries. Your name is already being removed from every case reference on their website." Philip said nothing. His hands were flat on the desk. "The bar complaint," Andre continued, "files the moment I leave Miami. That happens regardless of what you do in this room. Cooperation with federal prosecutors affects the shape of your criminal sentence. It does not touch the bar complaint. Not by 1 word. The bar does not negotiate when the license was the instrument." Andre looked at him steadily. "You used your bar number to file fraudulent legal documents. You used your professional standing to build the shell entity that received $800,000 stolen from me. The Georgia bar will move for emergency disbarment. Florida will follow within 60 days. Every other state you're licensed in follows after that." He let that settle. "You have no professional past to go back to," Andre said. "You have no license to protect. The only variable left is how many years you spend in federal prison. That is the one thing your cooperation can still influence. That is the only thing I am offering you." Philip looked at the bar complaint for a long moment. A muscle moved in his neck. Outside, a car passed on the street below. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang twice and stopped. Then Philip opened the desk drawer. He took out a pen. He signed the affidavit on the last page, the one Marcus had prepared, the one that laid out every step of the scheme in Philip's own professional language, precise and damning and complete. He signed it without asking for modifications, without bargaining, without a single word. He set the pen down. He did not look up. Andre took the affidavit, checked the signature, and slid it back into the folder. He stood. Beverly opened the office door. Andre paused at the threshold and looked back once. Philip was still sitting at his desk, both hands flat on the surface, staring at the empty space where the folder had been. He was not reaching for his phone. He was not going to call Diane. Andre already knew it. He had seen the calculation complete itself in Philip's eyes the moment he set down that pen. Clean, immediate, and entirely without conflict. Diane was a liability now. She had been for about 40 minutes. They walked out through the waiting room. The receptionist looked up and smiled again, professionally, having no idea what had just occurred 12 feet behind her. The glass door closed behind them. Outside, the Miami air was thick and warm, and smelled faintly of jasmine from a hedge along the building's front path. Beverly walked 2 steps, stopped, and let out a long, slow breath through her nose, the kind that carries 18 months of Sunday phone calls and careful silence and restrained fury. It came out of her all at once, quiet and complete. Andre checked his watch. 4:47. He had the whole evening before tomorrow. The waterfront condo was the kind of building that wanted you to know it was expensive. Glass and white concrete. A lobby with a doorman who smiled at everyone and remembered no one. Palm trees out front that had been planted by a landscaping company and would be replaced the moment they showed any sign of struggle. Andre had seen the listing in Inez's file. $740,000 cash, purchased 2 months after Diane's funeral. He had looked at that number once, put it down, and not looked at it again until now. Robert rode the elevator with them in silence. He had barely spoken since they picked him up from the hotel. His hands were folded in front of him, and he was looking at the floor. And he looked, Andre thought, like a man walking toward something he should have walked toward 18 months ago. The elevator opened on the 7th floor. The hallway was quiet. Pale carpet, recessed lighting, the faint smell of salt air coming through a window somewhere. Unit 714 was at the end of the hall. Andre walked to the door. He knocked 3 times, even, unhurried. Footsteps on the other side. A pause. Someone checking. Then the door opened. Diane stood in the frame wearing a white linen shirt, reading glasses pushed up on her head, barefoot. For 1 full second, her face held the ordinary expression of a woman who had answered the door expecting something unremarkable. Then her eyes found his face, and the expression dissolved completely. She grabbed the door and pushed it shut. Andre put his palm flat against it. No force, no anger, just weight and certainty. The particular stillness of a man who has already accounted for this moment. The door stopped. "Your father is behind me," Andre said. A long pause. He could feel the pressure on the other side. Her hand, flat against the door like his, the 2 of them separated by 3 inches of painted wood. Then the resistance gave. She backed into the condo slowly, arms falling to her sides. Robert stepped into the doorway and stopped there. He did not go further. He looked at his daughter, and she looked at him, and neither of them said anything for a moment that stretched long enough to become its own kind of verdict. Andre stepped inside. Beverly stayed in the hall, the door propped open behind him. The condo was beautiful in the clean, impersonal way of things bought fully furnished. Large windows, the bay visible through the glass, flat and silver in the late afternoon light. White orchids on the kitchen counter. 2 wine glasses drying on a rack by the sink. Andre sat down at the dining table without being invited to. He set Inez's folder on the surface in front of him. He did not open it. "Sit down, Diane," he said. She sat. He spoke for 7 minutes. No raised voice. No pauses for effect. He moved through it, The way he moved through anything load-bearing, with structure, in sequence, without deviation. He told her about the 11 months of transfers, every amount, every date, every window of 48 hours or less between her meetings with Philip and the movement of money out of their joint accounts. He told her about the Jane Doe, the woman whose death was used as a prop, whose family had never gotten an explanation for why their loved one's body appeared in someone else's accident report. He told her about the Emmys parking lot footage, Philip's car, the photograph Robert had been shown in that parking lot instead of a body, and who had been standing beside him when he looked at it. He told her that Philip's affidavit had been filed 2 hours ago, that Philip had signed it without negotiating a single word. He told her that the federal complaint was sitting with his attorney right now, pending only a check-in call at 6 o'clock. He looked at her across the table. Philip didn't call you. From the moment I walked out of his office, he made no attempt to reach you. He let that land. You trusted a man who was always going to choose himself. You built all of this with someone who signed your name into a federal affidavit in under 4 minutes. He folded his hands. That's on you. Diane had gone very still during it. Her face had moved through several things. Not emotions exactly. More like assessments. Reading the room. Looking for the leverage point that wasn't there. Robert stepped forward from the doorway. He stood at the edge of the table, and he looked at his daughter, and his voice, when it came, was low and deliberate, and completely without theater. You put a photograph in front of me in a parking lot, he said. You sent me to that building alone with a man I'd never met, and you let him tell me what I was looking at? I was standing there thinking I was identifying your body. His jaw tightened. You used that. You used the worst day of my life as a piece of paperwork. Diane opened her mouth. I gave a sworn statement, Robert said. 3 days ago. It's done. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and set an envelope on the table in front of her. His attorney's letterhead was visible through the paper. You're out of the estate, he said, and my attorney has filed a civil claim against you directly. He looked at her for 1 moment longer, not with anger, not with grief, but with the exhausted clarity of a man who had finally stopped protecting the wrong thing. Then he turned and walked out. His footsteps were steady, and even down the hall. The elevator doors opened and closed. The condo was very quiet. Diane looked at the envelope. She didn't touch it. Then she looked at Andre, and the calculation in her eyes shifted. He watched it happen, watched her move through remorse first, the way she pressed her lips together and looked down, a gesture that would have worked on him 2 years ago. Andre, she said, her voice going soft. I know there's nothing I can say. There isn't, he agreed. She stopped, reset. The softness adjusted into something more direct. What I did was wrong. I know that. She straightened slightly. But prosecuting this, federal court, all of it public, that doesn't give you anything back. It costs you time. It costs you energy. She paused. The equity in this condo alone is close to $400,000. We could resolve this privately, keep it out of the courts, and you walk away. Andre stood up. She stopped talking. He picked up the folder from the table. He held it at his side, and he looked at her. Not with hatred, not with grief, with the calm and complete attention of a man who has already decided everything. You filed fraudulent documents in my name, he said. You used a dead woman's body as a prop. You let me sit in the front pew of your funeral and cry. He paused. There is nothing private about any of that. And you do not get to purchase privacy from me. He walked to the door. Beverly was there. She held out his phone without a word. Andre took it. He scrolled to Marcus Webb's number. He pressed call. It rang once. It's Andre, he said. A pause. File the complaint. The plane lifted off Miami at 8:47 p.m. Beverly was asleep before they reached cruising altitude. Head against the window, arms folded, the way she had slept on road trips when they were kids. Andre watched her for a moment. Then he turned to the window on his side and opened the shade. Below was nothing, just darkness and the occasional scatter of lights from some town he would never know the name of. He did not sleep. He did not think about Diane's face when he stood up from that table. He did not replay the words or measure what he felt about them. He just sat with his hands resting in his lap and watched the dark and let the engine noise fill in the space where thoughts would have been. There was nothing left to plan. That was new. He closed the shade. He closed his eyes. He did not sleep, but he rested. And for now, that was close enough. The federal complaint landed with weight. 2 weeks after Andre's call to Marcus Webb, the FBI and the Postal Inspection Service opened a joint investigation. Diane and Philip had used the mail. They had used wire transfers. They had crossed state lines. Every layer of the scheme that had seemed like insulation became, instead, another charge. Prosecutors reviewed the documentation package, Inez's file, Robert's affidavit, the bar transfer records, the financial timelines, and made their assessment quickly. Philip Grant had spent 20 years as a licensed attorney. He had used that license as the architectural foundation of the fraud. He had filed documents under his bar number that he knew were false. He had exploited procedural gaps in the medical examiner's system that he had spent 6 years learning professionally. When Philip's attorney approached the prosecution about a cooperation agreement, the answer came back the same day. There was nothing to negotiate. The evidence package was complete before Philip signed a single word. His affidavit was useful at trial, not at the bargaining table. He had traded a warning call to Diane for a document that bought him nothing. The Georgia State Bar moved through an emergency disciplinary proceeding in 60 days. The findings were not complicated: fraudulent filing under bar number, abuse of professional position, conduct involving moral turpitude. The license was suspended pending revocation, and then it was revoked. The Florida Bar received notification and issued a reciprocal disbarment within 3 weeks. Every other state followed within 90 days. His consulting practice in Miami, already losing clients as the federal investigation became public, dissolved entirely before the condo was seized. At sentencing, the federal judge took 7 minutes to address Philip Grant directly. She noted the premeditation, the professional expertise deliberately applied to the commission of the crime, the particular aggravation of a licensed officer of the court who had used his standing as a weapon against a civilian who had no reason to distrust him. She sentenced him to 11 years in federal prison. Philip Grant would be 56 years old when he was released. He would never practice law again in any jurisdiction in the United States. Everything he had built his identity around, the credential, the title, the 20 years of accumulated professional standing, was gone in a disciplinary proceeding that took fewer days than Diane had spent planning the first wire transfer. Diane was arrested at Miami International Airport on a Thursday afternoon in February. She was at the gate for a flight to Nassau. She had one carry-on. She had a passport in a name Andre did not recognize until he read it in the news report later. She had been planning a second disappearance. She had not had enough time. She received 6 years. The sentencing guidelines accounted for cooperation. She had none to offer that wasn't already in the file, and for the particular nature of the fraud, which had caused documented emotional and financial harm to a specific, named individual who had attended her staged funeral and spent 18 months in genuine grief. The waterfront condo was seized in the civil asset recovery proceeding. The orchids on the counter, the wine glasses on the rack, the flat silver view of the bay, all of it gone back into the system that Philip had tried to use as a shield. Robert Whitfield testified for the prosecution in the spring. He sat in the witness box and answered every question put to him in a quiet, even voice. He did not minimize his role. He did not seek sympathy. He described the parking lot, the photograph, the man in the suit beside him, who had told him what he was looking at. He described the 6 months of silence after Diane called him with her story about Andre. He described the dinner table in Andre's apartment, and the moment the second photograph went down, and what he understood when he saw it. He called Andre 2 days after he testified. There was a long silence when Andre picked up, long enough that Andre checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. Then Robert said, "I'm sorry, son." 3 words, nothing added to them. Andre sat with that for a moment. He thought about the Sunday dinners at Robert's house during the first year of his marriage, the way Robert had called him on his birthday, even in the months after the accident. His voice, heavy with a grief, Andre now understood differently. "I know," Andre said. He meant it. Not warmly, not coldly, just as a fact he was willing to put down and not carry any more. He ended the call and sat quietly for a moment. Then he went back to work. 14 months later, Andre Cole lived in Houston. He had applied for the senior project director role the week he came home from Miami, a position he had been putting off for 2 years, telling himself the timing wasn't right, not fully understanding until recently that grief had been the reason he kept saying that. The firm had called him within a week. He was in Houston before Christmas. His apartment had large windows. The light in the mornings was different from Atlanta. Broader, somehow, less angled, the kind of light that filled a room rather than cutting through it. Beverly flew in for Thanksgiving. She burned the rolls. Not slightly, fully, completely, a smoke alarm situation that had them both standing in the kitchen, waving a dish towel at the ceiling, while the building's ventilation system worked against them. They ate the rolls anyway. They were black on the bottom and doughy in the middle, and Beverly declared them the best thing she had ever made. And Andre laughed, a real one, the kind that came from somewhere low and easy, and said she was the worst cook in the state of Texas. And she told him he was lucky to have her. And they finished dinner with the windows open and the cool November air coming in. She left Sunday. He drove her to the airport and watched her disappear through security, and stood there for a moment in the terminal, people moving around him in all directions, the ordinary noise of travel filling the space. He drove home. On Monday morning, Andre was at his desk by 7. The office was quiet at that hour. The overhead lights were still on their automatic setting, half-dimmed, and the city outside his window was doing what cities do at 7 in the morning, finding its pace, filling in its own edges, becoming itself again after the stillness of the night. He set a new legal pad on the desk in front of him, blank, clean, no questions circled on it, no names underlined, no damage to account for. He uncapped his pen. He pulled the Bridge Commission file to the center of his desk, a pedestrian crossing project, downtown Houston, a firm he had been introduced to 2 months ago and had been thinking about since. He wrote the first line of the proposal in his careful, even hand. Outside the window, Houston moved. He was not happy yet, but he was free. And, for right now, sitting in a quiet office on a Monday morning with a blank page in front of him and nothing left to settle, that was exactly enough. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.